Didn't actually make any notes this time. Funnily enough, but I enjoyed just sitting back and relaxing and watching this 3-hour marathon. It's quite long, let's say that. But Gub, what did you think first?
Out of all of the kind of epic films I've seen, I think this was the one I've most captivated. So when I'm talking like your 3 hours, like your Irishmans, your Apocalypse Now, those type of movies, this was by far the most captivating, I think, just because the storyline travelled so far. There was a lot of like poetic license in it, like when they stumbled across, all of a sudden stumbled across those two warring armies across the bridge and were somehow surprised by it. But yeah, I thought it was pretty epic. I thought, and there wasn't too much kind of filler. But so this is my thing with films. I've realised recently one of the most important things for a film with me is the score, the musical score. Remember when we went to go watch 1917, and you guys were raving about it, and I was like, yeah, it was the music wasn't there for me. With this, I was getting like chills at every scene because of the music. Like, it was so good.
Yeah, The Ecstasy of Gold is an absolute banger. I can just remember that tune so clearly in my mind.
Yeah, I think this is one of the first, especially films of that period. I mean, was it 1966? I mean, this is one of the first films of that period that I've actually stopped partway through and just thought, actually acknowledged the score itself that's playing in the background. When they go, I mean, the film doesn't even start like its actual plot until about an hour and 10 minutes in. Did you notice the amount of time and effort that it puts into building the characters and who they are? You know, Clint Eastwood and Eli Wallach. The amount of effort they put into actually building out who they are before they even go. You know, that wagon rolls up with the soldiers in it, and then they suddenly find out about the treasure. I mean, that's an hour and 10 minutes in. And they spend all of it before just going, here are your characters, and you know, but it just takes its time with it and just says, here you go, just have a look and see what you think about these guys, and then make your judgments later. And then here's the premise of this film. I quite like that, actually. I like a film that takes its time in unraveling itself almost.
Where does it start? Does it start out in the Does it start out in like the small town, like a ranch or something? I can't quite remember. Is that what the first hour of it set?
You get an introduction to each of them, so they each kill 3 people. That's the start, and you're introduced to them, and without them giving any dialogue, which is the best bit. So the first 10 minutes of the film, no one speaks, like no one actually says anything. Like it's absolutely mad.
Yeah.
So that's made up of like characters walking into and out of shadows, isn't it?
Well, and his like, you know, signature close up to massive panoramic wide to close up. That was just, you know, that's done straight from the outset. That is. So without saying anything, you get the I understand where I am, established shot, exactly where your surroundings are, to like super intimate with the characters, and you're just picking up all the subtext without them actually saying anything, and before pulling back into the scene, which is so good.
A massive emphasis on close-ups and long wide lens shots as well, you know, throughout the entire film, and even from the start. But you notice it the more and more it goes on, just how many close-up shots of people's faces that there are, even without dialogue. And I mean, we'll get onto it a little bit later, but as you get sort of halfway through, and you know, Blondie and Tuco get captured by the Confederate army, and then Tuco gets tortured. That scene is just some of the most powerful cinema I've seen from that period, I think, ever. I mean, I thought that was unbelievable.
Where he zooms in on the fiddle player.
Yeah. When they're playing the music, and those soldiers, those prisoners are knowing that they're playing the music for that reason as well. And Tuco's just getting 7 hells beaten out of him. But that's the music in the background as well, and like the fiddle player, they're all, the emotion in that scene is so raw, but like it's just so good. You don't expect it from a film of that genre, but also a film from 1966. You know, it's a different way of viewing cinema and viewing films. That I read that scene was banned in some countries. It's too graphic. Way too graphic.
It's very. I thought the film in general was way grittier than I expected for something from that era. Because if you look at all of the films from that kind of time, like Spartacus or Ben-Hur and anything like that, it's all ketchup, sachet, blood, like over exaggerations with anything. There was only kind of one moment where I think he like struck a woman with the back of his hand at one point, and it was really kind of obvious that it was fake. But other than that, it was pretty kind of realistic with the way they depicted the violence, which was quite surprising. Which I think I personally quite enjoyed, because we're that generation where we're kind of soaked in it.
I think it helps that Lee Van Cleef is such a good villain as well. Like, he just looks like a villain anyway. Playing the bad, but he plays that so well.
Did he get typecast, that Lee Van Cleef, after that film?
No,
so he's the good guy apparently in the other one.
So I think
it helped that I hadn't seen any of the other the sequels. Like I haven't seen any of them.
Yeah, in the Dollars trilogy, he played. They all play like different. I mean, Clint Eastwood plays the same sort of character. You know, the man with no name. But they all play different sort of types of characters. Only in that one that he's the evil character. But I mean, he's not even in it that much. In reflection, he's in it near the start, in the middle, and then he turns up at the end. But then by the time the shootout happens at the end, you know you're not rooting for him at all. It's so good, because I suddenly thought, you know, in today's day, if you're watching that, there might be some criticism being like, oh, we didn't see enough of the bad guy. But I think even in the good, the bad, and the ugly, you see enough of Van Cleef that you despise him enough. You know that he's, you know what. I think possibly even the torch scene makes the difference on that. But he plays the villain really well, and I think he's directed really well by Sergio Leone as well. It's clearly a passion project of the directors. He did a lot of spaghetti westerns at the time, but this is one of the best ones.
Yeah, I remember reading about that being like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly being like the accumulation of all of the other spaghetti westerns or something that he'd done. I remember listening to him talking about it being a passion project. Had you read that somewhere, or have you just inferred that from?
No, yeah, I'm just saying that. It's just clearly he cared a lot about it. I mean, he must have been an incredible director to work for. He knew what he wanted. I mean, I don't. You know, Clint Eastwood back there. I mean, there's only a few members of the cast that are actually alive from that film anymore, but they all say that it was an amazing experience. Filmed in Spain as well, of all places. You can go to Sad Hill Cemetery. It's still there.
Yeah, you can. There's loads of fans that have done. There's been like a massive fan project there. Yeah, there's.
How did you guys think the film was going to end? Because the whole time I thought that Blondie was basically playing them both, and that he hadn't actually been told the name of the grave, and he was just holding on to that secret to survive, and he was somehow going to play out from there.
I thought that. I did think that.
That's what I thought the twist was going to be. So I was quite surprised that it wasn't.
I don't know what I thought, actually. To be fair, when you phrase it like that, I think. I felt like when they were setting the dynamite under the bridge, maybe he did, but maybe I thought he was a little bit more blasé and carefree about it, like whether he really cared that much in the end. Perhaps that's something that you would know more if you watched the other two films in the trilogy that were prior to this one. But at the time, I don't know. I invested so much in Tuco, though. I thought his character was really interesting. He's a proper character actor.
Real character.
Proper character actor.
Real character in the whole film.
Yeah.
That was fleshed out. I have to say that I thought was the strangest part of the whole movie was that you watch it for 3 hours, and because there was so many scenes where there either wasn't much dialogue or they kind of involved numerous different characters that came in but didn't really hold too much significance, that the only person that you kind of spend significant screen time with and has a lot to say and gets fully fleshed out is Tuco. He is the only person that happens to.
It's interesting.
It's so weird to say that you sat down and watched a 3-hour film and there's only really one proper character in it.
It's interesting you say that, but James, do you think that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a film about Tuco rather than the other two? Because Blondie's supposedly presumed as the main character, but that's just an assumption. It's a story about Tuco, isn't it? And the man who saved him originally.
I don't think it's a character film. I think it's one of those films where it's not character based. It's a storyline film. It's just they give you a lot of build up so that you can sort of delve deeper into the relationships between the three by the time you get to the climax of the storyline. I didn't really get that it was a character film.
You mean like as in
background? It's
character serving story as opposed to story serving character.
Well, it's one of those. If it was an hour shorter, it would have been a film almost in the sense like your Lock Stocks or your like your first kind of few Tarantino films where it's like a couple of storylines cut into each other and then they intertwine. So if the first intro is 15 minutes long and you only got a snippet of each character, but because they give you that time, it just fleshes out the storyline more. That's the way I thought. If it was a much shorter movie, it would have been a much more of a, oh my gosh, that's how their story paths are going to cross. But you kind of build into it.
No, that's fair enough. I see what you mean in that. It's I'd say, the fact like you say it was spread out over 3 hours does change the whole dynamic of the whole thing, because you sort of get to, what was the first hour or so, Tuco is looking to just kill Blondie, isn't he? Get avenged him, you drag him through the desert, dehydrated, and all of that, until they actually have a purpose, and Blondie plays him. There's but they have this sort of, it's not companionship, but sort of this love-hate where they do, one of them always has the upper hand on the other throughout the whole film, even right up until the end. Because not to spoil the ending, but it's seeing Blondie ride off at the end. So you could assume the ending could be anything from that point. Didn't have to be what happens right at the end. But I don't know. Is the final showdown? Is it between the three of them? I can't. Is it between Van Cleef, Tuco, and Blondie? Yeah. And basically, does that gunfight feel like in some films where you get to the end and you see that where the characters were in the beginning was always going to lead to this point. I can't remember how the story moves, so I can't really.
It does feel inevitable. It really does feel inevitable.
Based on who they are as characters, that they end up squaring each other off at the end.
Yeah,
but it's not anticlimactic, I don't think.
No,
exactly. That shootout scene is
shot in the music.
The shootout scene is 5 minutes of just cuts of their guns, their hands on their waists, their eyes looking at each other. 5 minutes.
With Ecstasy of Gold in the background. Yeah. 5 minutes. What other kind of film, especially today, would put 5 minutes in there? And but what I was saying is, when you see that, you'd laugh at it today. You'd laugh if you saw that in a film, and you think, oh, this is just a practical joke. But you see it there, and it's like it's earned its place in that film, having that kind of climactic ending, which takes its time in even doing so, building that tension of, three gunslingers, one of whom in the end doesn't even have his gun loaded, but he doesn't realise, because again Blondie's had the one up on him. But it's just like, you don't know that at the time, but you watch this 5 minutes, especially today. You don't have the attention span to sit down and watch 5 minutes of that in your own time, do you? But when you're watching a film like that, you totally invest in it, and I think it's done so brilliantly, because if you did it today, it really wouldn't pass the bar. I think you would just find it funny. It probably wouldn't have passed the bar then if it weren't for the score. I think there is. I can't really remember. I'm sure somebody's made a cut of that sequence without the score, and it's quite interesting. It just feels like, that cliche of the tumbleweed just like rolling past the it just feels like that for like 5 minutes straight. And also filming it and cutting it without the music having been made must have been so odd. In fact, I'm sure Ennio Morricone must have made the score for them to edit it with. But I'm not sure. But I feel like it probably would have been unbearable. Not unbearable, but it would have been a lot more difficult to invest in or be immersed in if that score weren't there in the background.
Yeah, I think the whole thing's tied together by the music.